to hear the recording.
Okay, good morning, good evening, and good night, everyone. I'm Malcolm here, alcoholic addict. Okay, so I've broken the story up into like sort of drug addiction history and character building, I suppose breaking down and building because both things build character. So I was born to parents who came from Durban in South Africa. Uh, Unfortunately, my mother was already groomed into a relationship with a terrible, terrible human being. Um, my early days, I was a very, very quiet kid because of the psychological trauma that I got given by whom I now refer to as a sperm donor. Apparently, I was doing puzzles before I was walking and talking because it was just easier for me to sink into myself and kind of remove myself from family and society than to deal with issues at the time. I had a number of problems as a kid, a lot of health problems, which kept me having needing a lot of attention from my mother and from my mom. And David, he's the sperm donor. He um, he was a very malicious human being, and apparently couldn't handle the amount of time that I had to get from my mom, and became very threatening towards her. At one point, my brother told me that he had walked into the room and seen him holding a gun to her head. And I questioned my mom about this in later years, and she said to me, Malcolm, I cannot count the amount of times that he had a gun to my head, which is quite a tough thing to hear. Um, yeah, that's a bit of a tangent. So being a kid with so many medical problems, as it were, or at least they thought it was medical problems, but all the tests they did, they couldn't find anything wrong with me. In fact, the doctors eventually decided that their diagnosis was this kid just doesn't want to live, which is a very odd thing to hear as an adult, to hear
Totally
about yourself
understand.
as a kid. Um, but it makes sense in context when you hear that apparently the way that the sperm donor used to manipulate my mom was he would never give corporal punishment. He would always insist that she does the corporal punishment. He would always basically make her the scapegoat for anything. Uh, so far as like when my brother and I were ill the one time and basically very, very ill. I think she said it was measles or something. He effectively said, no, no, just the kids are just being misbehaving, just beat them. And she obviously that's struck a chord with her, and she took us to doctors and found out they were actually very, very ill. And then at that point started to suspect that something was very off about this relationship that she was in, and started taking me to psychologists. And psychologist was basically at wit's end, and eventually said, you know what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to write down everything this kid eats, everything he does, what he plays with, when he plays, when he goes to bed, how easily he goes to bed. Basically, write down every damn thing so we can have a record and trying to see what the hell's wrong with this kid's head. And he said, but you can't do that alone. You're going to need help. So can we call your husband in to come help deal with it? And as soon as he stepped into the room, and basically said, "Oh, she's too damn stupid to do this. She'll never be able to do this." Obviously, the psychiatrist or psychologist was, "How? Well, that's interesting. Mrs. Phillips, please can you leave the room and let me talk to your husband?" And effectively, after that meeting, called my mom back in and said, "There's your problem." Uh, on a bit of a side there, so what the sperm donor told my mom was that the psychiatrist said that my mom was sick in the head. So he was completely gaslighting her the whole time. But of course, my mom kind of knew where she was standing and made steps to divorce the sperm donor, thankfully, because I can't imagine how it would have turned out otherwise. Um, and I learned that we actually escaped during the night. Basically, he was out the one time working, and we just left the house with whatever we could. Um, and tried to have him not find us, which he obviously eventually did because he still stayed somewhat around to some extent. Anyway, I digress. So So early years, obviously, I wasn't a very secure kid. I was undiagnosed ADHD back in those days. It wasn't really a well-diagnosed thing. It wasn't really looked for, clearly, because the psychologist didn't pick it up. Um, and but I was a very good kid in school. I was very studious. I was very motivated by school, although I was also very withdrawn and I always withdraw back into art. I was often bullied because I was a very tiny, tiny kid. Yeah, so that's kind of like the early years. Going into taking that kind of that shyness and insecurity into high school, I effectively spent my whole time in high school feeling very insecure. I made a few friends that were kind of superficial. Um, and then in high school through later years, that's the first time I had alcohol, which wasn't really like a big deal. I was kind of like a bit of a goody two shoes initially. And until I think the second, so what happened is in matric, which is what, grade 12, I think, or something for you folk. In matric, I had done okay with my scores, my marks. I went to a specialized school that dealt specifically with art, and I got a distinction with painting. So all my art marks were pretty high, which kind of makes sense for a person who was withdrawn and did nothing but draw when he was withdrawn. Excuse the pun. But my math mark was something left to be desired. So since I'd actually started school when I was 5 years old, I decided to repeat matric, kind of have another year of growing into maturity and another year of trying to better my math mark and have like more potential for a career in later life. And that was a great thing and a bad thing because effectively that second year having ADHD, it was even harder to focus on things that I'd already done for 1 year. And all my friends have now left, and I was left by myself. And I used to just wander around the school, just not having friends at all, just talking to people at random. And this is kind of where the start of the character building came in because I honestly saw myself as an absolute loner without any friends. And then the one day we were leaving from break or recess, as you might call it, and somebody walking up the stairs next to me said, "Malcolm, you're so intimidating." And I said, "What?" And she said, "You're so intimidating." I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And she says, "Everyone's so scared of you." I was like, "No, man, bullshit. What are you talking about?" And she's like, "You can just take people like down like that." And she snapped her fingers. I said, like she says, you know everything. You know all the skinny on everyone, and everyone's afraid of you because you can just take them down." And I was like, "No, man, bullshit." And I never really gave it much thought until the end of that year when we had our matric dance, like our farewell dance. And I ended up sitting at the table, not by mistake at all, because people chose who sat at their table. I didn't even bother putting my name down, nor did I have a date even. But I ended up sitting at the table of all the popular kids, all the top dogs, those kids that are the wealthy parents that donate to the school, the attractive kids, the popular kids. And I ended up sitting at that table, and every time I made eye contact, I could see that they were afraid of me. And I thought, how? Like this is how I see myself and how others see me is there's a big divorce between those two things. And that struck me as really interesting. So when I went out of high school and into Technicon, I effectively went in there with this determination to build myself into a different person. Uh, just a short step back there. In that second year of high school, what exacerbated the feeling of loneliness and isolation was I'd got into a relationship that it was that first love kind of thing, and got terribly, terribly hurt by that relationship, and actually ended up trying to commit suicide. And I had taken a handful of pills with the intent of not waking up the following day. Thankfully, did wake up. Apparently announced that I wasn't feeling well, weed all over the bathroom, said I wasn't going to school, and went back to sleep on the couch. And only after quite a time did my brother realize that something was off. I phoned my mom, and they tried to get me to drink salt water and regurgitate, but by that time everything was in my system. So it turned out that the handful of pills that I'd taken weren't as strong as I thought they were, so sleeping pills. So I just spent like 3 days on cloud nine with pink fuzzy edges to everything I saw. And deciding that I was time. My mom said time is man-made, Malcolm. I looked at her and I thought about it for a bit and I said, I am man-made. A joke that sits with me to this day, but I digress. So yeah, so I got into Technicon days, and at that point I really felt like I had um nothing to lose really. So I hadn't quite built up confidence as a personality as yet. I didn't quite know who I was yet, but I also went in with a newfound knowledge that I didn't have to be who I was before. And yeah, that drove me forward for a while. I won't go into like career stories because that's a whole other side. I mean, I've lived for 50 years now. I could talk forever. Um, but yeah, so I in Technicon is I think where I really started experimenting with drugs a lot. Um, in that relationship, I started with a Russian girl. I was dating her for about 3 years. Um, she, in fact, was so attractive that everyone really wanted her, and I was the only one that was able to approach her because I had nothing to lose. And so when I asked her out, she was surprised, and we ended up dating for 3 years. And because she was such a popular, attractive girl, I kind of ended up by default being at her side, being the VIP at clubs and invited to all the parties and being with all the in crowds, the top dogs at the club places. Not that I ever saw myself that way. It wasn't really much of an ego thing. But it got me into a point where I was obviously taking a lot of drugs. There was a girl I dated after the Russian girl whom she got me into cocaine for the first time. And yeah, that's put me in a place where I ended up in an apartment in the north of Johannesburg, actually living with drug dealers. And so cocaine and ecstasy and LSD were always at hand, at beck and call, and offered for free. And this brings me to the first time that I kicked a habit where I actually moved out of my own apartment to move back home with my mom in order to get away from drugs and to basically get myself clean. And in that time, I also decided to, after being through a couple of really bad relationships, decided to take some time off to find who I was. And took about a year and 7 months off from being in any relationship. Became quite a clean boy at that stage. I was gainfully employed. And that's where, well, first of all, I met my mentor, who was actually my boss at the time, my best mate, who taught me another little legacy that I carry around with me, where one day we were at the coffee station and there was never any milk because the milk always got finished quickly. And I said, "Oh, no problem. Come to my desk. I've got cremora, like coffee creamer in my cupboard." And he was like, "Malcolm, you know what astounds me about you is that there are two types of people in the world, those who complain about problems and those who solve problems, and you're the latter." And I thought, well, shit, I never thought about myself that way, but hell, I'll carry that with me. And now it's a legacy. Now, whenever I have a problem, I feel like, he saw me that way. I better continue to keep up that agenda and always try and solve problems instead of complain about them. Not an easy thing to do, but it gave me something to carry forward with me. Um, in fact, yeah, also, I mean, I had a massive car accident at that time as well. Not drug related. I was just feeling very dodgy and kind of just drifted through a stop street that I'd stopped at every day going to work for 3 years. And I got sideswiped by a bus that was speeding. And yeah, I won't say I nearly died because I came out completely uninjured. But the same Andre, my best mate, when I looked at the situation, realizing that my insurance hadn't quite kicked in yet, and I just lost a car, he said, "Yeah, but you're still alive," and gave me that kind of perspective. He's an amazing, amazing person. So yeah, after I left the company that Andre was at, I ended up getting a contract in Tanzania and to help start an event company there. And this is now just before my wife and I got married, which, by the way, that's another story I'll tell another time, another share about how my wife and I got together and how important it is to be who you are. naturally. But in Tanzania, it was both a great thing and a bad thing because I learned very quickly that there's nothing to do in Tanzania but drink and take cocaine, and apparently uh, to sleep around, which the third part was not something that interested me. I was very happy with being with just my wife. But the other two really was there's nothing to do there and boredom hits. And I did It's, I mean, I barely slept while I was there for a year. And there's a story on the side where actually there was one of the times I went through, I arrived in Tanzania, wanted to get hold of some gear. And this chap basically took me into the settlements to go get what for me was I was just looking for 1 gram. And he handed me 10 grams. And I said, I just want one. And he said, no, you'll pay me for the rest. And guess what? I never did. I mean, how does a dealer hand 10 grams to a junkie and then expect them to pay him back? And I just left the country eventually. But yeah, that's nothing I'm proud of, but it does strike me as funny. Yeah, where was I now? Okay, so then okay. So so here I was stuck in a very, very bad cocaine habit. And unfortunately, it got its claws so deep in me that it effectively just became my world revolved around lies and deceit. It really does turn you like I never cheated on my wife, on Jess, but I certainly cheated on her with a drug, that's for sure. And I actually got caught by her after oof, it was about 10 years deep in this addiction. And actually, no, at this particular time, I didn't get caught. My apologies. I was at a party and I actually took a massive dose of LSD. This is a bit controversial, but I took a massive dose of LSD to the extent where I actually couldn't talk. It was very difficult to talk. And I thought if I can't talk, I'll just listen. So I sat down and listened to three people having a conversation about how to solve the biggest problems in this given world that we have. And instead of treating it as a throwaway question, these folk effectively broke it down into smaller and smaller pieces. And as they were talking, I just kind of saw all the interconnectivity of my entire life and everything that was wrong with it and the ditch that I dug for myself shrink down to one pinprick of a problem, which was cocaine. And I was like, fuck, I need to fix my life. And it was this like cathartic, some might say spiritual experience, but it really just like, I was like, I need to flick the switch. And I flicked the switch and it effectively went cold turkey. Um, and I mean, I immediately confessed to Jess, who was obviously shattered because she then thought our entire relationship was a lie, and I had to save my relationship. But it's yeah, so drugs saved my life from drugs, which is quite an odd thing to have to be heard said, I'm sure. I'm actually gonna I was gonna prepare a bit of a slideshow, which I never got around to doing because there wasn't enough. But I will in the chat there, I'll share a picture of a tattoo I got, which is some people might construe it as religious, but it's the molecular structure for lysergic acid diethylamine and uh, tetrahydrocannabinol, which is, I'm sure you know, is THC and LSD with the word saves in between, because those two things effectively saved me from much worse fate. And so when I had this epiphany, I effectively stayed clean for about 8 years. Uh, After 8 years, Jess and I had a very, very mature, and I mean, I was still smoking weed. In fact, I didn't smoke weed until I met Jess. Jess's father was a big smoker and she was a big smoker, and I, by default, ended up smoking with them. Um, and obviously I was still drinking, but it always went in a cycle. I never saw myself as a person with alcoholism. because I was able to go out and not have a drink and be the designated driver. I was able to just have the one drink. It never felt out of control. It would go into a cycle where I drink a lot, and I was also never an aggressive drunk. I was obnoxious, certainly, but never really aggressive. So I mean, I was smoking, and when I say 8 years sober, I'm talking specifically from the evil drug, the cocaine, which is always the worst for me. The thing that turned me into a terrible person. The rest of it was just made me a bit sloppy. So after 8 years, actually, it was 2020, the New Year's between 2019 and 2020 was when I had a very mature conversation with Jess, and we discussed recreationally using drugs together again, and we made a decision that we could handle it. And we did, and it was great for a while. It was great that I could have honesty about it. It was great that I wasn't controlling my life. I was in a good place emotionally. I was in a good place financially. We only ever planned it for when we had festivals, which was like maybe once or twice a year at max. And it was grand. And I really thought that I had things under control. There were times where I'd stop drinking for a period, whenever I felt like it was going too far. And never by any under duress. It was always my own choice to. And then this job happened where I was in a city adjacent to where I am now. And I did a job for clients. It was actually a repeat client that turned very sour. And because it was a repeat client and we'd had such a good working relationship the first time around, on the second time around, when they suddenly turned nasty, I had none of the legal points set in place to cover my ass, basically. I had trusted them implicitly, and they effectively did a 180 on everything we'd agreed upon in person. Um, are you still with me? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Okay, so and that's put me into a financial predicament. That put me into not only that, but it shattered my confidence, shattered my my feeling of it brought back all the imposter syndrome, um, and put me in a bit of financial hole into a spin that I couldn't really get myself out of. And and then I started using at home again, and the drinking became pretty bad as well. Then Jess caught me using. She had suspected, and she caught me using, and she was like, "What the hell are we gonna do?" And I had tried therapy when in my late 20s, and found the therapist to be very condescending. It's difficult to find a good therapist when you're smarter than your therapist. And so I then suggested maybe I should go to therapy again, and thankfully found the right therapist through my doctor and started speaking to the therapist. And unfortunately, at that stage, none of my childhood trauma, like I say, I was never beaten. It was never physical trauma, but certainly psychologically. I mean, just to give you an idea, um, the sperm donor he was a, a bigot, a sexist, a racist, a misogynist. Um, he was effectively a despicable human being, and adding a pedophile on top of that. In fact, still actively abusing young people. Never sexually abused me that I'm aware of. I don't think anything's brought up any hidden trauma from me, thankfully, but certainly has been confirmed. I think I think my brother and I got lucky because we were both boys, and he's never been interested in boys. So yeah, sorry, that just I hate hearing myself say that, so it got me a bit stumped there. I'm just gonna have to gather my thoughts again. Um, so none of the trauma from my childhood, none of that shit that I carried on my shoulders had ever been really properly been dealt with. So therapy started to bring that stuff out, and of course, the first parts of therapy is really does make things worse before they get better. And unfortunately, even with the therapy, I was determined for a while, but because of having all this stuff resurface, um, I started using while in therapy. And um, and the worst thing about that was I finally had been diagnosed ADHD and was given medication to deal with it. And on that medication, you're not supposed to drink at all. And I didn't really pay attention to that. And when you're drinking on Ritalin, you effectively get into depressive episodes, and it's a never-ending cycle because you drink to not be depressed, and then you drink because you're depressed, and then you get depressed because you're drinking, and effectively it was just getting worse and worse. And so this brings us to March 19th, but the last time I took cocaine. I had a bit of a binge. March 20th, I drank to try and drown the sorrows of having a binge and got myself super, super drunk. And at that point, I had made a lot of very terrible decisions. I had abused friendships. I had spent money that didn't belong to me. And I had come to a point where I was not wanting to be on this planet anymore. And in a state, I phoned Jess and I said to her, "You have to leave me." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "I'm dragging you down and I'm holding you back and I'm dragging myself down. And either you have to leave me or I have to be not here, disappear from this planet, or I have to, if we can, I have to go into rehab." And she said, "It's not like you're spending money on drugs that doesn't belong to you or anything." And I was like, "What if I was?" And she said, "Well, are you?" And I said, "Yes." And expecting to be completely abandoned and ostracized, to be honest, because in my head I was worthless. Um, she basically said, I knew that you were doing this. I was just waiting for you to ask for help." And and to my surprise, I found that all of my friends and all of my immediate family were fully in support of that. And that brings me to essentially then I mean, this time it was really like a bit of a wake-up call. Like that first time that I had that switch flick in my head when I'd had that massive dose of LSD and had that experience, it was kind of like that was brought back for me again. And it really felt like I needed to hit the bottom, rock bottom, before being able to bounce back up again. And thankfully that trajectory has just gone upwards. In fact, I was, as some of you may know, within about a few days, I found this group and was already blissed by the fact that I'd found a secular group because I'm sure you know, as an atheist, it's very annoying to try and mingle with a crowd that tells you you have to have Jesus in your heart in order to get better, which is fine for some people, but definitely doesn't work for me. And then two weeks and some change into sobriety, I did manage to find the opportunity to get booked into rehab. And in the rehabilitation center I went to, they really put you through a very stringent course. It's like 5 classes a day during the week of psychology and psychiatry, and you have doctors and nurses at your beck and call, and you have occupational therapists working alongside you, and you do group therapies, group shares, and they really, really dig deep. And finally, in that one big, I mean, you basically get 21 days to just look at yourself really long and hard and deep and bring out any cut that's there. And I threw myself into this program because I was just desperate, just desperate. I was so tired of feeling like I was worthless. And thankfully came out the other side of that feeling absolutely zen, if I can steal that word. I really felt completely at peace. Like all of my trauma, I left nothing unpicked as far as I know. And and I thank goodness for that. It was like an experience that I recommend to anyone anywhere, whether they are sick or not, whether they have depression, alcoholism, or just regular people struggling in life in general. Just highly recommend. Just take some time off to yourself, find out who you are, dig deep. The 12 steps are great, but they're especially practical 12 steps better, obviously, for me. But the ability to just take a personal inventory every day and keep moving forward as, to make good decisions is priceless. Um, yeah, and just having a community where you can be honest with others, etc., also priceless. So thank you. I'm on 90 days today, still early days, but that's 90 days of emotional sobriety and physical sobriety and mental sobriety. Because the thing is, in all the other times I've tried before to kick this habit on my own, I've been filled with a mess inside my head. And now my head is clean. Like I say, it's the metaphor is that I've been living in a house with the lights off my entire life. And yeah, I've collected things and I put things on shelves, and there's also cuck in there I've never needed. Um, and then finally, I found the main switch and I switched on the lights and gone, my fucking God, what is all this shit lying around here? And started like literally cleaning up, throwing out things I didn't need, dusting off things I thought were lost and gone and putting them back on the mantelpiece. It's yeah, that's a good metaphor for it. And yeah, so thanks to you folks. And thanks to the love and support of friends and family. And thanks to the ability to actually throw out the biggest toxic person. I haven't spoken to him in more than 2 years now and don't plan to have no contact with him whatsoever. Um, I'm on a good path to recovery. And yeah, I'd be very open to anyone asking me questions if they want to as well. Thanks for letting me share.